Hey everybody, I'm going to teach you how to do what's called an SQ3R. Now, this assignment is done with every chapter we're about to go into. It's a pre-learning strategy, as you can see over there on the slide that says the SQ3R study method, to remember more and to understand concepts better and faster. So, ultimately, this study method has you exploring and investigating new information that we haven't got to yet. Now, why is that beneficial? Because when you've already experienced or did a little exploration of topics before the teacher actually starts teaching about it, you have a little bit of background that your brain is already working on. You already know the topics that are coming up. So what's going to happen is when you hear me talk about them, they're going to ring a bell inside your brain. You're going to be like, oh yeah, I heard that before. Versus someone who never opens up what's coming, and everything that I say during a lecture or activity is brand new and they don't have any direction of where this is going. So by doing an assignment like an SQ3R, you're getting a leg up on someone who hasn't done that, and you're improving the efficiency and the acquiring ability of your brain to pick up new knowledge because something called scaffolding is already in place. You've already kind of created a mental map of what's happening in the next chapter we're about to get to, how it's structured, okay? So let's take a look at the individual steps of an SQ3R, and then we'll kind of do one on the fly so you can see how they work and you'll have a better understanding of what's expected of you. Okay, so again, it's called the SQ3R study method. Let me clear some stuff up here. How do you do an SQ3R for a given chapter? Well, let's start here. So the first thing that happens is what's called the scan step, or that's the S of SQ3R. You're going to look through the chapter at all the headings and subheadings and vocab terms and pictures, all the stuff that really jumps off the page at you, okay? And this whole process for the entire chapter for scan should take less than 5 minutes. Let's take a look and see how it works. Over here I have a biology chapter. This is called The Life of a Cell. And we're going to look at a chapter called The Chemistry of Life, chapter 6 within that unit. Okay, yeah, so unit 3 was called the Life of a Cell. Chapter 6 is the Chemistry of Life. Okay, so we can already see we're going to be learning about chemistry in biology. Okay, simply from the name of the chapter itself. All right, so we get to the first section of the chapter, and it's called Atoms and Their Interactions. Okay, it jumps off the page at me. I'm going to be studying about atoms, and interactions means how they work together and around each other. Okay, you also see atoms, the building blocks of rocks, and you. If I just really look at the things that jump off the page, elements. Here's a bolded black term, elements, probably a vocab term. Natural elements in living things in blue. Here's a table of some elements that make up the human body. Here are trace elements. Atoms, the building blocks of elements. There's the word atom again. Here's some diagrams of atoms. The structure of an atom. Electron energy levels there in blue. Isotopes of an element. Compounds and bonding. There's compounds, how covalent bonds form. There's some kind of problem solving lab here. We have some more pictures, more diagrams. Inside the text here, covalent bond, molecule, how ionic bonds form, ionic bond, chemical reactions, some more figures and diagrams, writing chemical equations, mixtures and solutions, acids and bases. There's the word solution. Another picture and diagram. Here we see acids, pH, base. What else do we have here? Okay, so that's all section 1. Now, that only took me a couple minutes to do it and say those things. But the one thing I want you to notice is I didn't read any of the body of the text itself. I pulled out words that stuck out to me visually, as we typically do when we flipping through something, but that's about as far as it went. In section 6.2, we see water and diffusion. I'm predicting we're going to learn a lot about water and how it plays into biology and whatever the heck diffusion is, right? And we see more things that are big and bold and highlighted in color, and as well as the dark bolded terms that we expect in education textbooks. So we're basically doing this visual scan, kind of reading out those big things that jump off the page at us. And then we get to the end of the chapter. So you can see right now we're in the third section in the chapter. You can also see it's a pretty big chapter. There's a lot of stuff in here. So we're definitely going to have our game on as we go and we start learning about cells and what makes them up. Okay, and then it looks like the chapter comes to a close after 3 sections. Right before you get to the chapter 6 assessment here, there seems to be one more little article about cholesterol. But other than that, you kind of just did a visual scan, and now you have an idea of what you're going to be learning about. Although very hazy and there's not a lot of detail there, you know what you're going to be learning about during this chapter. Okay? All right, so that was the scan step. Step number 2 is question. That's the Q of SQ3R. It says go back to the beginning of the chapter and start changing the headings, subheadings, vocab words, and even pictures if you need to into test-worthy questions. Write them on a sheet of paper, or in this case, a word processor, and number them. So you can do either one. You can handwrite them out, or you can use a word processor on your computer or a tablet or however you're working right now and do it that way digitally. And it says write the required number of questions per chapter. So out in advance, I'll always tell you how many you're looking for. And I base that on number of headings, subheadings, and vocab terms, basically. Okay? All right, so let's see what that would look like. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to show you how I would do this as an assignment. Okay? So let me scroll back real quick to the start of the chapter here, the chemistry of life. And this was really the first page here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open a new page. There we go. I'll slide it on over here. I'll get a little bit more space on my screen for you here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label this assignment SQ3R chapter. In my case, it would be chapter 6, and that's going to be over on the right, we always put our identifying information. So I'm Mr. A, and today's date is 9/28/20. And I'm even going to put my hour. We'll say that I'm in 9th hour. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and write question just so I know which document this is. And then underneath that, I'm going to start my question sheet, my Q of SQ3R. And as that little guide said, I'm going to change all those headings, subheadings, and vocab terms into questions. So if I look at the big blue heading, atoms and their interactions, I could get maybe a question or two out of that. I could say, what are atoms? And then number 2, I could say, how do atoms interact? Okay. Number 3, what else jumped off the page at me here? Oh, the word elements did. What are elements? Okay. Number 4, and notice that I'm not skipping lines or anything. I'm coming up with questions. And I see down here it says natural elements in living things. Okay. How about I go something like, what are the natural elements in living things? There we go. That's a good question. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, next page, 5, blue heading. What are trace elements? So, as you can see, I'm systematically going through and pulling all those big headings and subheadings and vocab terms and turning them into questions. The next one in red, atoms, the building blocks of elements. So I have that, and I have the word atom here, but I already asked that in 1, so I can bypass it because I know I'm going to hit that information. Let's go ahead and take one more look here. The structure of an atom. So I could say something like, what is the structure of an atom like? Okay, so I'm basically rearranging those words into something grammatically correct and sounds good. You can see it's not always like what is. You sometimes have to work a little bit and say it out lound. And if it sounds good and it sounds reasonable, grammatically correct, go ahead and get it on your sheet. All right, so let's imagine that I kept going down and I'm adding more questions, and I get all the way to like 30. Maybe Mr. Amon required 30 for this assignment. I'm done with the Q part, okay? So at that point there, I'm gonna go ahead and start on my 3 R's, okay? So first of all, let's see what those 3 R's are. Third step, read. Go back to the beginning of the chapter and start reading the chapter. You're not only reading to learn from the text, but also smoothly reading for answers to your questions, okay? And I'm going to tell you that the third step and the fourth step are done at the same time, okay? Now, let's look at what that fourth step is, the second R of 3R. It says on a new sheet of paper or document, start recording the answers to the questions as you come to them. Answers should be in complete sentences, make sense, and answer the actual question, okay? So what we're going to say here is that you are reading the chapter. You're giving it a whole pre-read. But while you're doing it, you're slowly looking for answers as you go from paragraph to paragraph. We are not hunting and pecking, okay? Let me repeat that. This is not a hunting and pecking exercise. We are there to do our first pre-read of the chapter and write down answers as we come to them. Remember, you already have a question sheet full of questions. So let's go ahead and we'll grab a new piece of paper. And we'll go back to the beginning. And we label up our paper, SQ3R. Again, this was chapter 6. All that identifying information over there. Date, same thing, 9/28/20. And then we said we were at 9th hour. All right, good. Now here I'm going to label this as answers, okay? Now for number 1, the first question was, what are atoms, okay? Now, sometimes the answer comes right away, and sometimes it comes later with a delay, okay? Now, if I started reading, it says atoms, the building blocks of rocks, and you, okay? So I already know that an atom is some kind of building block, but just saying an atom is a building block of rocks and myself may not hit everything you want it to, but we could start there. We could say atoms are building blocks. I'm going to guess that later we can add to this one, because I remember seeing a whole section on atoms that comes later, because I can always revisit this answer here. So for now, they're building blocks. And then, using prior knowledge, we already covered the characteristics of life. It says the difference between living and non-living things may be readily apparent to you. For example, these corals are responding to their surroundings, something you would not expect a rock to do. We know, however, that living things have a great deal in common with rocks, CDs, computer chips, and other non-living objects. Both living and non-living things are composed of the basic building blocks of atoms. Okay, so that did add to it. So it said atoms are building blocks of living and non-living things. Okay, and if I get even more information later, I can come back, revisit it, and do that one as well. Okay, then we get to our second question. Well, we keep reading actually, but we keep in mind what our questions are. Number 2 was, how do atoms interact? Now, we haven't really hit that one in our reading so far, so that may come later. And the third one is, what are elements? Let's go ahead and see if the answer to that is here in the text. Whoops, let's go back to 3. Okay, it says, everything, whether it's a rock, frog, or a flower, let me make this a little bit bigger, is made of substances called elements. Suppose you find a nugget of pure gold. You could grind it into 1 billion bits of powder and every particle would still be gold. You could treat the gold with every known chemical, but you could never break it down into simpler substances. That's because gold is an element. An element is a substance that cannot be broken down into simpler chemical substances. Bingo. There we go. There is our answer. An element is a substance that can't be broken down into simpler chemical substances. Okay, real nice answer there. But again, I was reading to learn as well as find the answer to that question. Remember, it talked about you could treat gold with every known chemical, but you could never break it down into simpler substances. So no matter what you do to it chemically, it's kind of at the rock bottom level, which is what this paragraph is trying to convey to you as a learner. Okay, and then number 4 would be next. Maybe we'll get the answer, maybe we won't in the paragraph, but we'd start reading of the naturally occurring elements on Earth, ... And as you come to the answers, you'd write a complete sentence answer for 4. And you'd keep doing that for your whole assignment all the way down to number 30 to complete your assignment if Mr. Amon assigned 30 of them to you. Okay, so that's what an SQ3R looks like on paper or in digital form. 2 pieces. You have basically your question sheet and your answer sheet. Grammatically correct questions, complete sentence answers. All right, let's go back to our list. So that would ultimately get you to through step 4, because you're recording those answers, and make sure they actually answer the actual question. So someone could write a complete sentence, but it has nothing to do with the question they posed, and obviously that's not the point, the goal. All right, the last step, SQ3R, this is the third R, is review. You got these 2 awesome pieces now, right? These are going to be used as a review for an upcoming quiz or an assessment, or just to get your knowledge base sound with whatever it is that you're learning. So in class, you would receive it back, and now you got this awesome study guide. But since many of you will be creating it digitally, again, you have 2 files. You have SQ3R questions, you have SQ3R answers. And you can maybe just print off a question sheet or look at them right on a screen and see, in the days before assessments, how many of these do I know? Do I know half of them? Do I know a quarter of them? So ultimately, you have the makings of this great study guide by going through that list and seeing how many you know, and then gauging your response to it. If I don't know a lot, I need to go study more, I need to read more, I need to go over the notes more until I know these questions. But remember, you have an answer key as well. You could give that to your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, whoever, and say, tell me, how many of these do I know? How many did I miss? So they ask you the questions, you answer it out loud to them, they check your answer sheet, and they write C or X based on whether you knew it or you didn't. So it's that simple. It's a great review tool if you do it right. If you don't hunt and peck for those answers, you read for understanding smoothly and slowly, finding answers as you go. Okay? All right, so that's how you do an SQ3R. You do it in advance of every chapter that we're about to go into. And it's a great study method, and you'll find out that it has some truly significant effects on understanding material. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.